things which are important to the NDR, constitutional court judges have come to decisions which seem to be based very much on their commitment to transformation and not on the actual wording of the Constitution.
What is the National Democratic Revolution? Is it the pure and only motivating force behind what the ANC does? Are there other factors at play? What can the NDR and trying to understand it tell us about the various policies and ideas that the governing party, the ANC, implements? Should South Africa have a coalition government after 2024? Could the NDR still be at play? How would all these things permeate in various different ways? South Africa has, over the last 10 years, experienced very low economic growth, high unemployment, largely because of our own policy decisions, our own policy choices, exacerbated by global events, things like the global financial crisis, most recently the COVID-19 pandemic. But because of the policies that we have been implemented and the ideas which are the fountain for those policies, the South African economy and society has perennially been placed in a very weak state. Joining me to discuss the NDR, to try and unpack at least some of its tentacles, its implications, its effects on the South African economy and society, is Dr. Anthea Jeffery from the Institute of Racial Relations. Anthea, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about the National Democratic Revolution, which is indeed the lodestar which drives the ANC and its dominant partner, the South African Communist Party. Both of those organizations have been committed to the NDR since the early 1960s, and they see the NDR as providing the most direct route to socialism. Now, that might seem an astonishing claim in this day and age, because after all, we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and we saw the disbandment of the Soviet Union in 1991. So how can it be that the ANC and the SACP are still pursuing socialism? And I think the answer was provided by Joe Slovo in 1989, soon after the wall had fallen, because he asked the question, has socialism failed? And he answered it, no. And the basis in which he decided that was that what had happened in the Soviet Union, in Mao's China, in Cambodia and other countries was a kind of pseudo-socialism. It was too commandist, it was too bureaucratic, it wasn't real socialism. Real socialism is participatory, it's democratic, it's focused on human rights, and that is what lies ahead in the future. And that is what the ANC and the SACP are therefore still pursuing. And it's not only our own Communist Party and its allies which have taken this view, but many other socialist and communist parties around the world, which after the fall of the Soviet Union simply continue to get together through the Socialist International and various other organizations to continue pursuing the dream of real socialism instead of the pseudo-socialism in which it cost the lives of 100 million people. So socialism is still the goal, and the NDR is the mechanism to achieve it. And the notion of the National Democratic Revolution goes all the way back to Lenin and his idea of a two-stage revolution, which he developed in about 1905, that the first part of the process was to seize power. He would say you would attain democracy. And then having seized power, you would then use that power to move towards socialism by incremental steps. And this initial thinking was further refined by the Soviet Union in the 1950s, at which point many African and Asian countries were newly independent. They had come to independence with primarily free market economies. And the idea was that they could be moved via incremental steps from a free market system to a socialist one. This is what the ANC and the SACP have imbibed. This is what they are busy doing. And they have been implementing the NDR since 1994. So they've had almost 30 years in which to pursue it. They see it as a 30 to 40-year process. So we're drawing closer to the end of it. And they've been really implementing it in stages, with a focus, first of all, on the political sphere. And then once the ANC had felt that politically it was sufficiently in charge, moving to the socioeconomic sphere. So perhaps just in terms of the political sphere, what do they see as the key priorities? Well, the first one was to use cadre deployment, to take control not only of the state, but also of institutions that are supposed to be independent, such as the judiciary and the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Human Rights the Human Rights Commission, the Gender Commission, are various institutions which support democracy. And the ANC recognized that this was a very easy way to, as it were, subvert the Constitution. You didn't have to change the meaning of the Constitution. You could deploy people to these various organizations, including Parliament, whose loyalty would be to the deployment committee, which had put them in their posts. On the surface, formally, they would be accountable to the Constitution and the law. Informally, behind the scenes, and far more importantly, they would be accountable to the top leadership of the ANC. And that is an enormous, obviously, derogation from any constitutional check and balance on executive power. And we saw it playing out in the legislature, for example, where one of our problems is that MPs are not elected in constituencies and so don't feel themselves accountable to voters in constituencies. Instead, they know very well that they have been placed in their positions by an ANC deployment committee, and that's where their loyalty lies. So when evidence of the Nkandla abuses, state capture, the oddities of Pala involving President Cyril Ramaphosa come to light, Parliament closes ranks around the executive and fails to hold it to account, which means that it's undermining one of its most important constitutional obligations, as stressed by the Constitutional Court in the context of Nkandla. Then that was one of the best judgments of the Constitutional Court, but unfortunately, the judiciary has also been affected by the NDR thinking, because though we don't have any proof that the ANC has deployed cadres to the judiciary, we do know that judicial appointments have been discussed by the National Deployment Committee, as we saw when minutes were leaked to the Zondo Committee by mistake. And so one wonders to what extent the discussion in the Deployment Committee has an impact on the decisions finally made by the Judicial Service Commission, which is, of course, full of deployed cadres. We can also see that the record of the Constitutional Court is mixed, that on the one hand, it's sometimes made very good decisions, the one that I mentioned on Nkandla, when it said Parliament ought to have done a better job, the one in which it held Zuma accountable for contempt, for failing to comply with an order of the court that he must attend the Zondo Commission and answer its queries. And yet when it's on matters that are important to the NDR, we see very weak judgments. And perhaps one of the most fundamental being on the Scorpions, where the Constitutional Court could, at an early stage, have really stopped the process of disbanding the Scorpions, but it found reason instead to say that what the government proposed to do was legitimate. In other spheres as well, on the meaning of non-racialism, on the meaning of property rights, things which are important to the NDR, Constitutional Court judges have come to decisions which seem to be based very much on their commitment to transformation and not on the actual wording of the Constitution.
Thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below on the National Democratic Revolution, the policies and ideas of the ANC, and the effects thereof on South African society, as well as on the economy, as well as your day-to-day lives, your business dealings, etc., as well as what you think the prospects for the country are going forward. Until next time, this has been Chris Hutton for the Center for Risk Analysis. Take care.